What's good, everybody? What's going on, man? It's Stephen Qualls II, aka Mr. Qualified. It's your boy, and we're back with another episode of Qualified TV. Of course, this week I have another amazing guest for you all. It's my first time getting the chance to interview somebody on this side of the music industry, so definitely a lot of interesting questions I want to get into. Definitely a lot of interesting insight and perspective I'm sure he will bring. But that's enough about me for the time being, or enough of my mouth. I will shut up, let him introduce himself, let y'all know who he is, what it is that he does, and then we'll hop into the interview as we typically do. So go ahead, let the people know who you are, bro.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Jeremiah. I also go by Jae Doug. It's a break of my first name and my last name. Um, I'm from the south suburbs of Chicago, Madison all day, 708. And all around, I'm a I'm an audio and music geek. Anything that is in regards to sound, I'm not only a fan of it, but I play a role in that being an audio engineer. So I'm an audio engineer. I'm also a DJ. I'm also a producer, a programmer, also a musician, and things along that side as well. I'm happy to be here on this show. So yeah, I'm excited to chop it up.
Of course, man. Yeah, no, I'm excited to chop it up as well, man. Get into it. It's so interesting that you kind of focused on sound. So I won't even start with music, but when do you feel like you fell in love with the idea of sound, or when did you realize that sound had this kind of effect on you where it, either like whether it's falling in love with it, whether you just realized that there was something about it that you wanted to figure out or solve? When did that relationship with sound start for you?
I feel like it started at a very young age. Um, I was one of those kids that like to take things apart and put them back together, especially because sound, especially when it was, like a piece of hardware, was something that had always intrigued me, as well as listening to sound effects in movies. For some reason, it could be anything. It could be an action movie. It could be, like slap cartoons like SpongeBob, or even like a Tom and Jerry or a Popeye, going all the way into sci-fi. There was something about sound that had always caught my attention. And I know subconsciously I would ask myself, like, man, like where do these sounds come from?
Yeah.
And even stemming to music, I remember the first time I was listening to hip hop, and it was something about the production itself, especially when it came down to sampling, when I would just be like, this just sounds like, obviously I'm 6 or 7, so I'm new to all of this at the end of the day, but it was just something very intriguing about listening to these sounds, but also just being out in nature. I did play a lot outside when I was a kid, even when I was by myself, and I was always just intrigued by the sounds of birds and even just like the sound of leaves. And when I was also skating at the time, like when I was skateboarding heavily, just the sound of like the skateboard clacking off of the sidewalk or any kind of pavement, that always kind of gave me an adrenaline rush, if you will. It gave me this thrill that I didn't necessarily want to lose, no matter how I was gonna get it.
Yeah, no, that's dope, man. I think it's cool when something so simple isn't the word I want to use, but something so simplistic and basic and genuine in its nature is something that translates into like our passion for something else that's a bit more tangible.
Yeah,
But it kind of starts from something that's very, very basic, or that you may not necessarily think about when you think of the bigger picture of something that somebody might be passionate about, i.e. sound, to music. So
yeah.
I think that's really cool. When did you start getting into music? So I know you mentioned that you heard hip hop and you loved the way the production sound, but what was your introduction into music in general? Like, was it just learning to play an instrument? Did you immediately know that you wanted to kind of be in the engineering space of things? Like, what was that kind of introduction? And then you can kind of take it into your journey as well from wherever you kind of started.
It really stemmed from my household because everyone in my family is musically inclined. So it all started from my dad pretty much being a drummer, and then my uncle who was living with us, him being involved in rap, and my sister being a vocalist, and music just being played all around the house. It's like you already know, especially in black households, Saturday mornings was all about cleaning up. And regardless if it was all of us or if it was just me and my siblings, so me and my sister and my uncle, music was just always playing. So between that and also growing up in the church with my dad playing drums in the church and my parents being involved in the church, music was just all around me. And it was something that at least I felt was essential in my life. It was like once I had gotten the grasp of just music in general, I would always ask my parents, ask my sister to just play anything. Like I didn't know what it was, but I remember it would come to a point where I would probably comprehend the CD and I would point to the CD to have my parents play it, or even when we would be in the car, um, just listening to all kinds of stuff. I would never make requests. I would just soak it in. And it was even funny because you can ask anyone in my family, but as a kid, I was heavily obsessed with the Temptations movie. You remember the one that like came out in what was that, 98?
I'm trying to think because I know the heartbeats was kind of like loosely based
Yeah,
on Temptations, but I don't know if the Temptations had their own like actual movie. I feel like they did, but I can't
yeah.
remember it exactly.
It was, I think it came, I think right after the Five Heartbreaks movie. That was a movie that was also consistently playing in my household, that I
Yeah.
was just that I just couldn't get enough of the soundtrack. And so being around all of that on a daily basis and just listening to music and listening to stuff that my uncle and my sister and that my family was listening to, it just I I I just knew right away that this would be something that I would enjoy and just take in as much as I could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, I think that a lot of people are surrounded by music in different ways. And I
yeah,
think that whether it's somebody playing an instrument, whether it's you hearing certain sounds around, I mean, I think that's the beauty of our generation. I think those of us that were lucky to have parents from a certain generation, we really
yeah,
got the early influences of that music. So even though we grew up on a different, like we grew up on a certain generation of music, we had
yeah,
our generation of music. But I think for us, it's a little bit easier to see how they're connected. And I think we just
yeah,
a little bit more evolution in music than I would say the generation coming up behind us. So it's definitely cool like hearing those stories because I don't think those are the stories anymore, in a lot of households where they're getting that type of exposure and having that type of
yeah.
influence from like a music standpoint. So that's cool. That's cool. So what came first? Was it being a DJ? Was it being an engineer? Was it being a musician? Like which aspect came first for you?
It was really being a musician, and it all kind of came around the same time, kind of like in sprinkle time periods,
Yeah.
because I used to go to a lot of gigs with my dad outside of the church, and it got to a point where, even when I was a kid, I would watch him play drums. I would want to learn how to play drums too. So say if like during the church service he'll be playing, I'll be sitting right behind him with my little drum pad and my little drumsticks, just trying to copy rhythms. So he eventually, saw that and saw that I had an interest in just learning how to play music. So I was a musician first, just from taking piano lessons and going from there and kind of like venturing off into production, because as I got older and I started going to studio sessions with him and I started seeing the production process and I started seeing, people messing around with synths and different keyboards and actually like recording music with these keyboards, and I'd be like, oh man, this is actually a thing. And me and my homies I grew up with, at first we wanted to start a band because I was heavily into rock and I was also heavily into jazz. Just like anything that had a band in it, I was like, all right, bet, this sounds like I would want to do this. I would want to play like piano and keys in the band. And obviously, like being in school, I also played trombone and I played piano and jazz band. But around the same time I was in middle school, that was when I had transitioned into being a DJ because I saw Crush Groove for the first time.
Mm.
So, like, are you familiar with that movie?
Yeah, I am. I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that for the first time, and all the other elements between rapping and dancing was cool, but it was something about DJing. It was like, no, you know what? I could do that too, and I knew that I wanted to do something with music, and it was just something about DJing that just captivated my attention just because that was during a time where DJing was kind of starting to become much more digital, but also very well known to the mainstream audience. But I wasn't fascinated with that side of DJing, just as far as like, playing in festivals on CDJs and like waving my hands in the air. It's like I actually want to learn about the art. So the same curiosity that I have for music theory, I also had for the art of DJing, which then led into producing because I'm like, oh, okay, bet I can start making flips, I can start making remixes and, you know, playing like live drum loops on the fly because I was very inspired by the low end theory scene and like the beat scene that was happening in LA in the early 2010s and just fascinated by DJs who used to create these routines and these sets and make all these crazy remixes. I was very inspired by that and I wanted to do that. So I then started venturing on making beats because at the same time, me and my homies, as much as we're, playing in this band, it was a band that had a mixture of live instrumentation and rapping, and it was just two of us. It's like we just wanted to take all of our influences in at the same time. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I want to learn how to make beats so I can make these remixes, but also, kind of back up my homie who's a rapper. And then we had brought in more homies and we all started making beats and rapping.
Mm.
But at the same time, I was becoming much more intrigued with the studio process. It's like, we're teenagers and we have all this access to all this gear that's in our bedrooms. So I was always plugged into just the behind the scenes where it's like, okay, we just finished writing, we recorded, the beat is ready, and now while everybody's like recording their parts and writing their parts, I'm focused on arrangement or, kind of adding things to the beat or cool vocal effects or anything that was more so the engineering line. So piece by piece, they all kind of came together because the minute I discovered one thing, something else came about, but I just didn't know what it was. Like I didn't know that engineering number one was a thing, even though I used to read a lot of credits on CD covers and it would say mixing engineer, recording engineer, mastering engineer. And then I'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then when I did my research and discovered what engineering was and how it's a field within itself, it started making sense to me. Like, okay, this there's actually a reason as to why I'm so intrigued by, the production aspect with me and my homies and just wanting to know, how to make the songs that we have sound better, if not polished, sound cohesive and sounds like something that can be digestible to everyone. That doesn't necessarily sound so rough. So that was when I had started transitioning into more of the producing and engineering route, still DJing, but things it's like my focus became much more concrete once I was in high school and I was in a program in my high school where we would learn how to record and there was this class in my high school called industry of music where we would all get in groups and there was an artist, there were producers, there were people who were managers, A&Rs, the whole nine yards, basically learning the aspect of the music business. It's like a module.
Mm.
So obviously during that time, I was the producer. So after school, we would stick around and I would record my homies who was in my group. And then after we would record, my teacher would be like, oh, okay, cool. Now you have to mix it. And I'd be like, mixing? What is it's like, okay, so I have to, it's like, oh, so obviously it's not done. It's like, oh, okay, so this is probably the next step. After I had just made the beat and everything. So and then to perform, obviously I was their DJ and
Mm.
I also had a radio show in high school. So I was still tending to all of like my musical worlds, if you will, between being in band, having a radio show, and being a part of this program to, kind of feed my skill set and do the things that I need to do in order to get to the next step of the journey. So to trace it all back, I was a musician first, and then everything else, everything else had like followed up afterwards.
Nah, yeah. I mean that trajectory of it, given the things that you were exposed to, makes a lot of sense, bro. I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun, to be honest. I won't say I didn't pick up the music gene, but like my mother is a musician. She's a pianist.
Oh, word.
My stepfather, he's a guitarist, bass guitarist. So
Okay.
like I've been around, and they have a band. So I've been around a band and been around music, my entire life. And my mom, so me and my younger sister, my mom, of course, wanted us both to get into music. So we
Mm-hmm.
both took drum lessons, both took piano lessons. Bro, I could care less. I was trying to go hoop. Mom's had me trying to sit down with the keys. I'm trying to go hoop over here. You feel me? I'm trying
I
to be
feel
the
that.
next CP. Mom, you tripping. But I say all that to say, my sister, she she took that, and it just, from you even talking about like all the different avenues you kind of saw things play out from that, like musical influence and starting as a musician. I've seen a lot of the same things
Yeah.
with her, and she hasn't gotten into engineering heavily, but I know, like, but even just learning all the different aspects of music, like starting with that musicianship and that
Yeah.
love of music, it definitely makes sense. But I also say all of that to say, what do you feel like is the biggest kind of life lesson you took from being a musician? I know with a lot of things that take that amount of practice and things of that nature, the biggest word that I hear a lot, or the word I hear the most, is discipline. And so if it is that, cool, you can expand on it. But if there's something else as well, what would you say is like the biggest life lesson you've learned or taken away from just being a musician and learning how to play an instrument?
That's very that's very interesting. That's also a good question. No one has asked me that before. So it's got my brain going because like yeah,
Good,
discipline
good.
did discipline does play a part, but I was actually just having a conversation with one of my friends a while back about influences and just listening to you here just listening to you talk about your experiences with music and you and your sister's experiences with music, it got me thinking about the word influence. And I would say my biggest life lesson when it comes down to just being a musician is to don't not be afraid to tap into all your influences because it'll help create your identity, because of the fact that, at least for me, I developed a very broad music taste pretty early.
Yeah,
And, learning about jazz and then learning about hip hop, but then also tapping into, even house because of the fact that, my dad is from the city. He is a city
yeah,
dude. And
yeah,
he was around during the time house was really just starting to become a thing, and just learning about all different types of music and just seeing like what picks up and what sticks out to me the most when it comes down to musicianship, even with DJing, just like creating your own identity. I feel like that stems from just you tapping into all your influences. So the things that inspires you and the things that just gets you moving, no matter what genre it is, because I feel like even now with me doing this for almost 10 years, I feel like, once you have them, they're never going to go away. They're always going to find a way to pop out. They're always going to, like, your influences are going to expose you one way or another. So I feel like it's like if we're talking like musicianship, to apply all your influences however you can, whether it be in a band, whether it's just yourself, regardless of what genre you play, anything that influences you, take that and utilize it to help create your own identity. I think that's the biggest life lesson that I've learned, especially when I was heavily playing in jazz combos and things of that nature. I started seeing it myself, just like seeing all the different jazz styles that had influenced me once I was studying jazz, and even taking my musicianship over to production, just coming up with beats and coming up with samples and loops of all the different genres of music that inspires me and that influences me. They they expose themselves. So I would say, yeah, that's the biggest life lesson. Just tap into yourself and tap into those influences.
Man, that's an amazing answer, bro. And it really, like, when you first even started, it struck me because I think that it's one of those things that are always there. And I feel like subconsciously you realize that you're being influenced by these things, and you know that
Yeah,
these passions, whatever your vision is, your dream is, it comes from somewhere. But I don't know if I've ever heard somebody kind of like consolidate what that could be called. But I think, the application of your influences is pretty accurate, because I do you feel like influences can be dormant, or that we allow them to be dormant if we don't, allow ourselves to kind of let them be exposed in what we do? Because when I was listening to you, I feel like, of course, you didn't say that, but I kind of thought about how everybody's influenced by something. And is
yeah.
it that influences just either affect you positively or negatively, or is it that influences can just be dormant because we're not really allowing them to be exposed in our work? Or is it both? And it just depends on, circumstances. Is it circumstantial? So what are some of your thoughts on that?
I do feel like it's both, because there are some influences that are circumstantial, but even I feel like, those would tell the best stories. And even if
Mm-hmm.
you're talking outside of musical influences, experiences that you may have had, or a conversation that you may have with someone, or even other things that you consume and partake in, or even just your environment is also influential as well. So with it either being positive or negative, I feel like channeling channeling all of that and allowing yourself to introduce all of that into your world, I feel like will not only help make you will not only help you create effectively, but I feel like it'll also bring authenticity to the table, and then you'll have a very unique way of telling your story, because you've tapped into the resources that you have, that being, your influences and the things that were around you, and you've introduced them to your creative realm. And so now you can take what you have and just, basically express yourself in a very unique manner.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely, bro. Like I said, that really hit home. That's a gem. That's that's a good one for sure. Um,
Word, man.
what kind of moving forward, what would you say is your favorite thing about DJing or being a DJ?
I think my favorite thing is to just continuously share music and tell stories through the sets that I create. I've even with my 2 year hiatus of DJing publicly, just
Mm.
because I've been doing so much work at the studio over the past 2 or 3 years. I've always shared music. I have so many playlists, dude, on top of like the music server I have at home, on my Spotify, on my YouTube, on my SoundCloud. I just have a bunch of playlists, and I just love sharing music. So whenever I have the opportunity to share music in a very, not necessarily linear, but a more so expressive matter, and I get to create a flow of things just by creating a set list, and then seeing how it resonates with different people when you put two songs that are probably unexpected to go together actually work, and just seeing how, that energy resonates with the crowd, and it resonates with the audience, that energy is reciprocal. And I feel that as well, because that just lets me know that, they want more, because they're vibing with the story that I'm telling them, and I'm able to, excuse me, control the crowd with that. So that's just my favorite part about being a DJ, is just, once again, tapping into my influences and just sharing all kinds of music, regardless if you've heard it before, if you've never heard of it before, if it's a remix of something, a flip, anything of that nature. Like, I just get a joy out of just sharing what's in my library and just seeing it resonate with different people.
Yeah, nah, that's real. I mean, I've had the opportunity to talk to a decent amount of DJs, and there's the same like baseline of approach and like goal from the standpoint of like, you know, moving people and moving crowds, but
Yeah,
hearing the different type of like psyches of where that comes from, what the goal is, what their personal vibe is, that kind of plays into what they feel like a crowd will want based on how they are as a
yeah,
creative. I think that's really interesting because of course, like every DJ is different, and not just down to how they mix, but that library. What are your musical influence? Something like we're seeing now in this age of mashups and stuff. There's
yeah,
songs that nobody would have thought that these songs would go together, but it's like
dude.
if that's in your library, if you can dig into the depths and figure some of those things out, it's a lot of stuff that either already was sampled from it to begin with,
Right.
or whether it's BPM, whether it's vibe, whatever, it's a lot of things that go together. So
I
yeah,
I'll say this, because this is also something that I share a lot with some of my homies. I'm glad that now we're in the era where, we're in a time where remixes and mashups and edits are becoming more sought after, because during the time while I was first learning how to DJ, I was a fan of internet radio, and I was a fan of, obviously, like, underground producers and things of that nature. And remix culture was such a big thing, especially if we're talking 2013 on up. Like, we started getting all these crazy remixes of songs that used to come out in the 90s and the 2000s, and it was a mixture of different genres. It's like, if we're talking specifically like 2014, 2015, what some people would consider part of the golden SoundCloud era, where we had all of these producers that would just make these insane remixes and these flips of a Brandy song or a Drake song, or even, like a Missy Elliott song. And they were just getting plays after plays after plays. And at the same time, internet radio has started popping on SoundCloud. So now we started getting these platforms of these producers and these DJs getting the recognition that they actually deserve, with these crazy mashups and these crazy remixes. So, like, now where they're posting them on TikTok and still tapping back into the producer community, because that's all where it has started from. But now you have a much more bigger platform to be like, hey, yo, I just made like this like Drake Baile Funk remix, or like this this, Aretha Franklin house remix, if you will. And it just resonates with people. And it's like, I love going to the comments and, seeing what people say, like, oh yeah, I heard this on TikTok and I just had to, tap back in. Like, oh yeah, TikTok brought me here, or selection brought me here, type things.
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, I love seeing stuff like that, because I'm like, finally, bro. Because even playing them in DJ sets, like, people would always ask, like, yo, what is this? Like, where can I find this? It's like, you're gonna have to go on SoundCloud and like
yeah,
dig for it, because obviously it's not out. But then luckily we started getting these channels like Majestic Casual and Underground Charisma that even started promoting those as well. So started promoting those same remixes and those same producers, and the platform just grew. So now I would definitely say that now more than ever, I'm very excited at the time that we're living in, as far as, you know, mashups and remixes are concerned. It's like I'm glad that more people are now starting to tap into that side of the community, because you'll find some really creative stuff in there. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And man, you brought up everything that's a part of like my introduction to it. So I didn't start using SoundCloud until 2015, which was late. Like for me, like my homie had been on SoundCloud for like, or like just been finding music on SoundCloud for like 2, maybe even 3 years, like 2 years minimum at that
Yeah.
point. And I remember I forgot what he sent me, but he put me on to something on SoundCloud in like 2015. Started using it from there, realizing how much music was on SoundCloud. Then
Yeah.
I think it had to be 2017, first time I got introduced to Selection. Like, and I heard it was a flip of Return of the Mac. And I was
Yeah.
listening, and I was like,
Yeah.
what? I was like, what is this? This is
Yeah.
fire, bro. Like, what is this? Found out it was on Selection.
Mm-hmm.
Been hooked on Selection ever since, like from the context of like knowing that they gonna have fire edits, fire flips, remixes. Got to the point where I'm going through Selection edits and I'm
Yeah.
screenshotting what's on SoundCloud so I can go back, find it, like add it to my library. And
Right.
so like you like in the same way, like seeing that resurgence of it happen now on TikTok, it's like I was already like a part of that community that knew they existed, that knew these were fire, but now it's like, oh, now everybody else seeing it. I never forget.
Yeah.
I had some mashup that I had played for like a couple of my homies. And this was like, I think this might have been like my last year, like toward the end of like undergrad for me. And so we was at one of these day parties or something like that. And one of my homies was a DJ. And so I sent him the link and I was like, bro, just drop this. Like just play it and just see what people say. And I remember it dropped and like it didn't have a reaction like I had, but it was a lot of people definitely like,
Like, oh,
it's different. What's this? Kind
I'm
of
like,
like this.
oh,
You know what I'm
like,
saying?
oh, okay,
So
word.
yeah, it was cool, man. I'm glad I'm glad that resurgence is happening as well, man.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So as a DJ, however, like you spoke to that transition of going from DJ to being a producer, what what is what does producing do for you? Like, is it based on the artist? Is it based on simply what you're able to create just for yourself, that's for whoever? Is it about the collaboration, or what role does that play in like what it does for you? Just kind of touch on like what producing does for you, what it gives you in terms of, like energy, fulfillment, all of that good stuff.
I feel like I feel like now, with this year of me tapping back into producing a little bit, especially just from doing a whole bunch of engineering and really locking in with a lot of producers, especially like producers that, you know, I'm close with and the ones that I still meet. I feel like what producing does for me is it definitely stems from a collaboration standpoint, because I understand that, you know, especially when it comes to producing, that as a producer, your job is to basically, you know, form an Avengers, if you will. It's like basically form a team. You don't necessarily have to make the beats, but when you put, but like when you place different people together and you form this team and you guys create something that's awesome, you know, you pretty much had a hand in producing that. So I feel like with me, when it comes to producing, what it does for me is not only does it let me explore different things, but it also allows me to collaborate, especially because of the fact that I'm always engineering, and I love engineering, like practically to the bone, the entire process of it and everything. And obviously, like, as engineers, we're also producers. But I also love tapping into what I know, but also collaborating with artists and musicians and different producers, and kind of merging our two worlds together to create something that's unique, but also to just create some dope stuff. And I feel like me right now, my contribution to the community is just making a whole lot of samples and just making loops, and even like collaborating with other producers and making them together. And it's like we'll both make the beat together, or I'll just send them a pack and they'll send me that same pack of crazy beats with the loops that I just gave them.
Mm,
But also at the same time, when it comes to the artist, it's really tapping into their world. It's like what's going it's like what's running through their mind. You know, what's the vibe here? What is it? What are we looking to? It's like basically what are we looking to express in this manner, especially when it comes down to the sonics as far as like recording and like mixing the record. It's like these are questions that I always ask artists before we even do anything. It's just like, all right, what's the vibe right now? You know, what's happening in your world? What's running through your mind? And that way, especially if we're making something from scratch, we'll have we'll pretty much have a blueprint, and then we'll just roll off of that. So producing for me, it allows me to tap back into those same musical influences that I always had, but it also allows me to collaborate just so everyone can lean onto their strengths, but we can benefit each other's weaknesses because we all know that whatever one's weakness is somebody else's strength. And
absolutely.
we both raise the bar together because we're all playing our roles, and we're all like leaning on each other to just make this happen. So producing for me is a very collaborative and expressive thing because I can even do something as, arrange the beat, or I might add in a bass line or something, or I might add in a sound effect. I could either produce the whole beat from scratch or just like arrange the beat, and then we just build the song from that. But I want people to I want people to shine at what they do best. I want people to really tap into the frequency that they're building for themselves as much as I am. It's like we're all doing what we do best, and because of that, we gonna make something dope out of it.
Yeah, no, that's fire, bro. I mean, I think the spirit of collaboration, especially and with music, is so interesting because, like you said, and I feel like that was great insight within music. Like you said, there's so many different types of engineers. Like every producer has a different approach in mind. So when you can get a team together, like somebody might be better at arranging, somebody might be
Yeah,
better at just knowing like what's the small thing that a song needs or that a beat needs.
yeah,
So and I think the greatest thing about collaboration is understanding that no gift has to be put to the side to make
right.
something great. I think sometimes that pride and that's in general, but I think sometimes pride plays a large role in feeling like if I'm doing something with somebody that's as gifted, equally gifted, more gifted, whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
that somebody, some factor in the entire equation has to be seen as like less than.
yeah,
Think that when you can get past that and just like you said, realize that okay, in the same way I'm great at something, there's something I'm not great at, but
right.
somebody is. So if I can, as opposed to being in some middle ground between my strength and my weakness, if I take my
Yeah,
strength, somebody else's strength, the opportunities could be endless. So that's
yeah.
that's amazing insight on that.
And even when you were asking about life lessons, I feel like even the life lesson that I've learned being involved just in studio work, just doing a lot of engineering, is as well as influences like knowing when to put your pride to the side and put your ego to the side, and understand that if you have the opportunity to do so, bring people in as much as you can. Like if I'm working on the beat, if I know that there's something that I can't do, but I know that somebody else can do it and they can do it 10 times better because they literally eat, sleep, and breathe the shit,
Yeah,
then obviously I'm tapping in with them. And because of that, the song is just gonna be, we just took it to a whole nother level because I already know that I could do this and that, but they can also bring this, and this to the table. And, or like even if it's just like a simple phone call, be like, hey, what do you think about this drum beat, or what do you think about this melody, or these top lines, if you will, or just hey, this artist wants to do this project, and I'm engineering the project, but also they're looking for beats, or they just want to look for a producer. So, tap in and let's do it. Let's just do this together, and let's all pitch in the influences. Let's all just be hands on with this process. So even if something as far as like, hey, I just recorded something, but the artist is like, all right, all right, we're gonna have such and so, mix this, or I just mix this, or hey, we're gonna have somebody else master this, or whatever the case may be. It's just not letting your ego get in the way, because as creators, we're all very prideful of our work. I'm very prideful of my work, especially as an engineer, because I know what I've done to get here, and I know how much time I put in my craft. And it's like, I get very excited whenever I can just do this in general. But people, some people, they want a fresh ear perspective, which is also a good thing. And so sometimes when it comes to, passing things off to the next whomever, you just have to, and yeah, especially with anything in life in general, you just have to put your pride to the side, like, all right, bet, if this is what's best for the song, and this is what the artists feel is best for what it is that we're doing. All right, bet, I'm with it. What do we got to do?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, bro. I mean, yeah, I mean, collaboration can be beautiful, if you let it.
Yeah.
It's just, like you said, it's all about just like letting that ego go. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's something I wanted you to give a little bit more insight on. And maybe you didn't say the word specifically, but the idea of how placements work for, producing or for production. So, what insight can you give, or just for people that wouldn't know, like, how do placements work? Like, what all goes into being able to be credited, on something? Does the percentage of credit matter in regards to like what you receive in compensation for it? Like, what's kind of just a short synopsis of placements, so the person who's not in the industry, who doesn't have that kind of insight, so they could understand it.
Yeah, for sure. This is one part of the process that I'm not I'm not too involved in, but I have been a little bit when I was in the producer role. So I'm gonna try my best to explain it just based off of study and experience. But pretty much with placements, and before I answer your question, are we talking just like how to get a beat or a song over to an artist, um or
What
just,
what is that process, and what are the options in general? Like, what are
oh
the options of how a placement can even be created, or how it works? Like, what are the different
oh
steps to it?
it can work a few ways. The most organic way is basically building with that artist. So if you're with an artist, and you tell them like, hey, I make beats, I have a studio space, come through anytime, and let's just cook up. Those the stories and the journeys that we follow of, you know a Missy or a Timbo, or even a Michael and a Quincy, or a Smino and a Monty, or all these, or like a Kendrick and a Soundwave, and the Drake and a 40, of producers and artists just, coming up together. That's pretty much one way. Or even placements could work as to where, you can post things online, just do like different beat videos, or even, make something specifically for artists. There's beat stores, there's beat packs, there's also sample packs, and there's also sample makers and like samplers who just make melodies, or they make loops that a producer, might take and make a beat with. And then next thing you know, you guys both have a placement, whether it be through an email or even with an artist, because that things have just been flowing that way over the past few years. So there's definitely a few options as to, how to get, a placement when it comes to when it comes to just beats and production. I think the most organic way, or even the most common things that we always hear besides people just sending beats back and forth is just growing with the artist or being a part of a community and just growing with even more creators because, you know, in beats as well, you don't necessarily just have to focus on music, you know, also tap in with videographers or even tap in now with like content creators, especially with the platforms that we have now with Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and TikToks, or it's like, hey, somebody's posting a TikTok about shoes and they just and they're looking for beats or they just want some music, they want some different kind of music. You
Yeah.
can also tap in that way and just or you know, a director might have a reel that they're just making of all the things that they've done, like creating a portfolio or even a short film. But it's like, hey, you know, I can compose the music or I can produce the soundtrack or even like music supervise the soundtrack, anything in that nature. You know, there's just ways that like you can plug yourself just so not only can you, you know, collaborate with someone, but also build organic relationships that way versus just sending things back and forth through DM, you know, but actually bringing the personality and the authenticity to it as well. I hope that answered your question very accurately. I wanted to make sure that I was trying to be like as accurate as possible.
No, that's fine. I like I said, for I know like bits and pieces, but even understanding all those different ways you can kind of get into the industry. Hell, you said music supervisor. I said, what's that? What they do? Let me learn a little bit more about that. That sounds cool. I can
Yeah,
supervise music, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But you know, it like those different avenues. I don't think a lot of people may know the different type of ways you can get your name out there and get your work out there because everybody may not get lucky enough to link up and kind of end up being on the same path and be on a crash course with an artist that you know that y'all can have that type of working relationship that y'all both kind of grow together. That doesn't happen for everybody. So
yeah,
knowing that you can find other ways, and even if that's not necessarily a goal of yours, you know, just knowing there are other, you know, ways to, you know, make a profit or just, you know, be able to be compensated for doing
yeah,
stuff like there's other avenues that may not be as extensive. I think that's just, you know, good information for people to know. So yeah, it
yeah.
definitely answered the question.
And also beat tapes too.
Mm,
I'm a huge fan of beat tapes. If you just like want to put out an instrumental EP or yeah, just like it doesn't necessarily have to be. I know now like nowadays when people think of that, they primarily just think of lo-fi, but it doesn't just have to be that. It's like if you just like want to create a beat tape to just put out as an EP or an album on Spotify or like any other DSP, you know, to not only just put your name out there, but also just move as an artist as well and tell a story. You can do that too. And then through that, who knows, somebody might want to say, hey, you know, you did this beat tape. That's dope. How about we just do a whole project? Or like, hey, you know, what do I have to do to, you know, license some of this stuff for my content? And it's all just because you were just like, I have this pack of beats or and I'm just like, all right, well, I actually just want to see what it might sound like just putting it out as an instrumental album, just like on some Dilla or some Mad Lib or like
yeah,
Alchemist shit. Even Doom was doing that. MF Doom,
yeah,
like MF Doom has a lot of beat tapes where, and even hell, even people, even artists like Mac DeMarco, they're like
mhm,
there are just so many producers and artists, especially now, where it's like, yeah, you know, just put out a B tape, you know,
yeah.
and see what stems from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, bro. There. I mean, I'm a huge fan of beat tapes as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, all types of different avenues, man. So yeah, hey, if y'all are making music, if y'all are producing, tap into these markets, man. It's ways for y'all. It's ways for y'all to get to the bag, expand your network, all of that out here. He just laid out all the gems.
for
Again,
sure.
that's like the second or third time he done dropped gems. So I hope y'all listen. Uh, but nah. So we get to engineering. What is like audio engineering? What is sound engineering as it relates to music making or the music industry, whatever the case may be? What is your, if you had to define it, in 2 sentences. I'll give you 2 sentences if you, and I don't know if that's too much or too little, but that's what you got. 2 sentences. What is audio/sound engineering?
2 sentences,
Two
man.
sentences, but they can be run-ons. They can be run-ons.
They should give me that leeway because man, I had a feeling you were gonna ask this question. I was like, man, okay, how can I simplify this too? Audio engine. Okay, so audio engineering is it's it's a craft and a form of quality control and communication.
Mm,
So audio engineering, and this is just this stems not just from music, but in anything that uses sound as a medium. We go from recording all the way to mastering. So what I mean by communication from a recording aspect, or even what I was talking about earlier, like knowing what the project is and what the intention and the goal of the project is, because your job, we're kind of like sound, we're sound camera people. You know, we capture not only the sound of the performance or whatever it is that we're recording, but we're also capturing the performance, because at the end of the day, the artist in the system of music, the artist has to be comfortable when it comes to recording. They have to be comfortable with the environment and the recording process. And because their intention is to give, you know, their best work, they want to make sure that they give the best performance as much as possible. We as engineers, or even if they're recording themselves, we as engineers have to capture their best performance and help them communicate the message that they're trying to get that they're trying to get across. The quality control aspect comes in where, you know, obviously, you know, now we have these recordings. Now we have to make it. We pretty much have to, you know, make it listenable, but also we have to make sure that, you know, everything is fine tuned the way we see fit. So that's where mixing comes along, where it's like we're blending things, we're taking things out, we're adding stuff, we're cutting them, we're moving things around. We're basically we're pretty much taking the plate that was given to us, like all the ingredients that were laid out, and you know, the oven was preheated when it was recorded. Now we're getting ready to like actually cook it when it comes to mixing and building up off of what we already have. The last half of that, when it comes to quality control, is mastering. Mastering is like the icing. We're putting like the icing on the cake now. And now we're making sure that it's ready for streaming platforms. The misconception when it comes to mastering is that we just have to make things loud, and that, you know, we have to make things like, you know, we have to bump things up so they can sound great on Spotify, if you will. But the the process of mastering, which is why all these other steps are so important leading up into mastering, is to make sure that the fine tuning has a shine to it. It's like all the dynamics of the song and everything that we're going to hear in this song is even more well balanced and can be distributed in a way that is pleasurable for everyone, but also sounds familiar, because you don't ever want to listen to something where it's like you listen to one thing and it sounds like this, and then you listen to another song and it sounds like this. It just sounds low,
mm,
especially with the algorithms that are placed with all these DSPs, where it's like if a song is too low, they're going to bump it up and it's going to be loud, and it's not going to sound as pleasurable as you wish it would. Or if it's too loud, they're going to turn it down to like now where it's going to sound squashed. It's this process that they have called compression, where it's too loud, they compress the song level to whatever standard volume that they have it to. And if
mm.
it's too loud, the algorithm isn't always going to work in your favor. There might come an opportunity where it's just going to sound it's just going to sound it's just going to sound too squashed. It's not going to be dynamic. There's not going to be any movement to it. So yeah, audio engineering really boils down to quality control and communication.
Yeah. No, I mean
Yeah.
that's I mean that no, that's a great at least for me, like it was easy to follow, and that's a great breakdown. I think that's like you said, that's a process that in general a lot of people I don't think understand the ins and outs of and understand how crucial it is. And I think the quality control aspect is a great like term to use in regards to like the role you all play, because like you said, it's a matter of like really having to make it sound pleasurable. And I think even that process from having something recorded to
Yeah,
mastered, like a lot a lot of work and a huge difference in like obviously what you hear as a final
yeah.
product. So even with that explanation, with audio engineering, do you feel like that's the lane of music that you're the most satisfied in?
I feel like I feel like with all of them, they bring me they all bring me a sense of satisfaction in a very unique way. But I will say that I feel like engineering has always been my calling. I just had to lead up to that. But there were bits and pieces in my journey that had shown, the future engineer in me what it will lead to. The fact of the matter was just getting my foot in the door, because the second I had learned the craft of engineering, even when it came down to just recording my friends and understanding, how how mixing works, how recording works, what goes into recording, even before recording, what goes into a room. And also I have an electronics background. It's like I love messing around with electronics. Like I build things for the studio. So even learning about that and working with my hands and translating that same passion towards sound designing or even editing audio and mixing, it made sense early on that like this was my calling. This is the thing that brings me the most joy and the most passion. And even how that's adjacent with producing and also DJing. It's like engineering. Yeah, I guess it does bring me the most satisfaction, because I just love sonics. I care so much about sonics. I just love not necessarily how things sound, but really like how they make me feel. Because, even going towards what I was saying about my hardware side, my electronic side, obviously now we live in a digital era where everything is more so in the box, it's in the computer. There's not really a whole lot of people that is messing around with tape machines and big consoles anymore, and everything is just like now controllerized and digital. But even they bring their own sound and their own character. It's the same thing with microphones, and it's the same thing with any other type of electricity that you use, whether it be any kind of hardware, the speakers you use, the headphones you use, or even instruments. They all bring a specific character to a recording, and that that just satisfies me. It's like I love it when I have an artist, or even when I'm doing podcasts or just anything that requires a microphone, where I can try out different microphones and be like, I wonder what this mic will sound on you, or what this mic might sound on you. Or when I'm outside with my field recorder recording everything that's around me, and I'm just using either my phone or my actual handheld recorder, they all bring a certain amount of character. And the fact that I can take it back to the studio and, tame to it and manipulate it however I see fit, it's one of those things where it's like I hear the character of it already. I hear its true nature. And that's what makes recordings or just audio itself much more vulnerable, because you hear the sonics that was built into it, and that just gives you enough to just work with. So yeah, engineering definitely is satisfactory for me, because I can tap into all parts of myself and really just nerd out about sound and be able to share my passion alongside with the artist or whoever it is that I'm working with, and just do what I felt like was one of the things that I was called to do.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I mean, it's always cool seeing people talk and like geek out about the things that like they geek out
Yeah.
about, because it's like everybody has their thing that just all the intricacies of it is like, I love it. Like I love this thing. Like I'm so passionate about this thing. This small
Yeah.
thing that may be nothing to this person means like the world to me in the sense of my understanding. So no,
Yeah.
I feel it, man. 100%. Okay, man. We have talked about so much as it relates to sound, as it relates to influences, as it relates to music, as it relates to all the creative branches, of yourself and things of that nature. With everything that we talked about, with everything that you learned, all the challenges that you've experienced along the way, all the adversity that you pushed through, what would you say makes you qualified?
Qualified to
Be an audio engineer or to be a creative
uh,
in general.
I'm very patient. That's like that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in everything that I've done in my journey is just patience. And with patience came discipline. I had to discipline myself to not necessarily look for the instant gratification of what it is that I was doing, but being patient between process, personality, even just resources or circumstances. Like I've through this I've learned that patience really does go a long way. And even like as an engineer, like especially when you're recording somebody, you don't know how many takes they're gonna want to do, especially if it's a very vulnerable song or with artists that really takes their performance seriously. Like you may come across a time where you might do 75 takes. And I've actually done 75 takes where I've sat in this chair and the artist was either in the booth or right next to me. And it's just like, all right, next, 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 same take. It might be 75, it might be more, but patience really goes a long way. And knowing that, there's a goal in that there's a goal in sight, and knowing that I'm gonna do everything that I can to make sure that I meet this goal. I've learned how to utilize patience to the best of my advantage. So I think that I think that is just what qualifies me, if you will, is just patience and understanding, and just not taking any of this personally. And also, like I like to think that I am a fun person to be around, especially in the studio, because I'm in my domain, and I just love sharing knowledge. I love sharing my passion, just sharing what I know. So that plays a part into that as well. So yeah, patience and understanding.
For sure. Yeah, that's actually come up, before from another guest. And I think that being a creative in general, patience is going to be key regardless. And of course it may look different for different disciplines, but I think patience to discipline is also probably a very key relationship, because I feel like a lot of people that I interview and a lot of people who are in the space of being a creative and creating art, um, there is no instant gratification.
Yeah.
Everything in a sense is fleeting from the standpoint of validation, engagement to a degree. Like all these things are fleeting because it's never really a guarantee. A lot of times it's always a hit or miss. So I think that patience to discipline connection,
Yeah.
major,
Because
major.
like yeah, because also too, it just allows you to enjoy the process. It just it allows you to actually focus on just what it is that you're doing right now and what you can learn from it, whether it's an opportunity that you're seeking to get, or seeking out knowledge, or working on something that may just be in the rough, might be a diamond in the rough, or you haven't even started yet. It's just one of those things where when you're patient and you just take a step back and realize what it is that you have in front of you, that's just compelling enough to just enjoy this process alone. Because then once you get to that, you're going to look back and realize, like, man, leading up to that was just so much fun. It's like, oh man, like the session that we did to this one song, it was so much fun. Or just like, I had so much fun mixing this song or curating this whole playlist for a DJ set. It's like I just had fun doing it, and I wasn't worried about, being validated or just looking or just skipping over steps to get to the finish line. I was more so just pacing myself, running the marathon, and just looking at all the scenery around me, like, oh shit, this is pretty, and just keeping it moving.
Yeah, nah, that's real. That's a good analogy. That's a good way to look. Man, I want to thank you again so much for taking the time to allow me to interview you, man, to allow me to have you come on and talk about your story, your journey, all of that, man. Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate you thinking enough of the platform to come on. So
Man,
no, definitely again, I appreciate you taking your time. And I say this at the
likewise.
end of every episode. I will continue to say this for this entire season. They're dropping gems, people. These people are dropping gems. I need y'all to pay attention. I need y'all to lock in. I need y'all to really take heed to what they're saying, because while some of it may be applicable to their professions and disciplines, a lot of it is just applicable, in life in general. So,
Mhm.
yeah, man, let people know where they can follow you and where they can stay updated or follow any of the projects or anything that you have going on that you want people to know about.
Yeah, man, for sure. So you can follow me on Instagram. It's hi _ I'm _ so it's hi _ JAE _ And if my email is in there, like both of my emails, if you want to ask questions or even, want to know more things about the studio I'm at, which is Full Circle Studios. You can also follow our Instagram at Full Circle Stew. It's no spaces, so it's all compound. And then through there is my link tree that I'll link you to all the projects that I've worked on. I do have a monthly radio show every second Sunday of the month called Sunday Special. It premieres on Beloved Radio, but then it posts the next day on Mixcloud and SoundCloud. So you'll be able to check that out too. And there's also another platform that I'm building, particularly just to focus on audio education for both beginners and also folks that have been doing this for a while to people who just think this is cool and just want to see what's up. It's called The Office. So be on the lookout for that soon.
Absolutely, man. Sounds like a lot of dope things already at work. Hey, man, tap
Yeah,
in. These are amazing people, bro. Tap in
bro.
again, bro. Thank you so much for taking the time, man. Feel like we had an amazing conversation.
Yes,
Feel like
sir.
a lot of different things. So yeah, hopefully people take heed. But that is it from us, and that's it from me. Until next week, and until the next episode. I catch y'all next time. Peace.
Thank you, my bro. Peace out.